Welcome to Peaceful Painting, where I invite you to share a few moments of creative stillness with me. I'm Sammy, and I'm really glad you're here. So today's video it's a very practical one. A local art gallery gift shop has asked me to curate a set of really beginner-friendly watercolor kits, which is going to be really fun. And so this meant choosing paints that are really affordable, that they're approachable, but still really enjoyable to use. So I tested 4 different super budget friendly watercolor pan sets. The kind many beginners use, or even returning painters who kind of just want to come back and play and either aren't able to or don't want to invest in a really expensive set of watercolors. So this video is just to share what I noticed, and a couple things surprised me, and which one I ultimately chose for the kits. So let's jump into the first set. So the first set I tested is this very simple, easily available Crayola watercolor set with 8 colors. And I'll be honest, I was kind of surprised by this one. The paints activated, meaning they took to the water and became creamy kind of right away. And they felt much smoother than I expected too. The colors were bright, vibrant, easy to work with, especially for such a basic set. You have 8 colors in this set, which is great. It's enough to do a lot of different things, but not so many colors that it's overwhelming. And the palette, the number and types of paints, the colors of paints were very well balanced. So you have everything you would need to create a landscape, some florals, even a simple abstract work. You could do a little color mixing with them, so you could get a bit more of a range of the different colors. But for a very beginner set and an entry watercolor kit, I think they would be good. That said, the paints didn't mix as, of course, beautifully or predictably as higher grade watercolors, but definitely not a deal breaker for that entry set. And it keeps things super playful and low pressure, which is exactly what I want. Another thing that was a nice surprise was the brush, which was really decent, and it had an actual point on it, which is great for making small details. And I also love that the lid doubled as a palette so that you can mix your paints together or just kind of wipe a little bit of the water or the paint off your brush if you wanted. You don't need anything extra to get started. And bonus, at around $2 and easily found at a grocery store or big box retailers. I think I got this one at my local grocery store years ago. I found it in my stash of things, which is great. It's very accessible and very affordable. So for someone brand new to watercolor or someone kind of returning and just wants to play around with the paint, this one was surprising in a really good way. It was simple, again, affordable, and genuinely enjoyable and fun to use. Okay, let's go on to the second set. So the next set I tested was the Prang watercolor kit. And this set comes at little higher price point, about $6, and includes 8 colors. So I noticed it needed a little more water and just a bit more patience to get the colors to activate, as compared to the Crayola set. But once they did, they were very nice to work with. The colors are vibrant and clean, a little more depth and brightness than I expected for a $6 price point, and they mixed together really nicely and felt consistent once the paint and water came together. One thing I did miss in this set, especially if I'm thinking from a beginner's perspective, was the lack of a pre-mixed darker value such as a black or a brown, which could make painting things like landscapes or flowers a little more challenging unless you're comfortable mixing your own darker colors. That said, this is still a really nice budget-friendly option. The brush that came with this set is surprisingly good. It held a nice point and it was really easy to control, which I think is really important when you're learning watercolors. It's a different type of medium and a little harder to control than, say, acrylics. So overall, the Prang set felt like a step up in color intensity and consistency when compared to the previous, the Crayolas. And it's a good choice for beginners who want a little brighter colors and don't mind mixing some of their own darker tones. Okay, let's move on to the third set. Okay, the third set that I tested was a generic watercolor pan set that I actually ordered in bulk from Amazon. So this one box came in a bigger box of 30 individual kits for about $26, which works out to about 88 cents per watercolor set. And because of the price point, I went into this one curious, but also pretty realistic with expectations. These paints were definitely the hardest to activate, and I usually use a spray bottle and then just spray my watercolor pans with a little water to kind of wake them up. And with this set, I had to spray a couple times and let the water really sit a while before the paint became usable. And even then, I needed a pretty wet brush to get enough pigment. Once it was kind of awake and ready to use, the paints felt quite chalky and definitely more opaque than the other sets. They dried with a flatter matte finish, which is different from traditional transparent watercolors, like the first two sets, but it's not necessarily bad, just different. The biggest challenge I had with this set was the brush. It was thin and it didn't hold a point, which made it frustrating to use. And I think for a beginner, a brush like this can make painting feel much harder than it needs to be. So towards the end of using this set, and once the paints had absorbed enough water, they became a little smoother and more enjoyable. But getting to that point required some patience and experience, which are two things that beginners are still developing. And because the paint quality and especially the brush, this isn't a set that I would choose for an artist curated beginner kit. I think it would be difficult for someone new to watercolor to really feel successful enough to want to hang their work or share it with others. That said, these sets definitely didn't go to waste. I donated them to a local nonprofit art group where they'll be mostly used by kids. And for that, it's perfect. For playful, experimental art making, they're a really great fit. Or maybe that just means we need to be more childlike and it'd work for adults too. I don't know. But for my purposes for the kits, creating a welcoming, confidence-boosting watercolor kit, which is what I'm going for, it really just wasn't the right match. Okay, we have one more kit. Let's get to that one. The final set that I tested was the Rowney Aquafine travel set, which includes 12 colors and comes at a little higher price point, around $14. From the moment I started using these, there was a clear qualitative difference. These paints activated immediately. They were creamy and smooth, and they mixed really well. And everything about this set feels like a step into beginner fine art watercolors. The color range was great, and with 12 colors, you have a little wider span of tonal values. the lights, the midtones, and the darker colors. And that makes it much easier to create depth without needing to mix quite as much. The brush was really nice, and the case was well designed, again with the inside of the lid doubling as a mixing palette. It's very compact, it's sturdy, and I thought thoughtfully put together. That said, I also found myself thinking that a true beginner might not yet appreciate just how nice these watercolors are. They're a little more refined, which is wonderful, but at the level of quality, it really shines, I think, once someone has a bit of experience. And at $14, the set is actually a great value for what you get. And I think it would be an excellent next step for someone who maybe starts with a basic kit, discovers they really like watercolor, and wants to continue. It's also a really great travel set. It's small, easy to tuck in a bag, and has everything you need to paint on the go except your paper and your water. So for the purpose of curating the beginner watercolor kits for the gallery and gift shop, though, the price point is really what holds me back on this one. So including this set would push the overall price kit higher than I want, especially when it's compared to my acrylic kits that are already selling very well at the gallery gift shop. So while I wouldn't choose this for the kits I'm creating right now, I'm very glad I own it myself and can see myself reaching for it, especially when I travel or I want to keep my watercolor practice really portable. So which ones did I choose? I bet you already know. So if you guess that I chose the Crayola set for my kits, you would be right. I think for the price point, how easily they activated, how smoothly they painted, and the overall brightness of the colors, and the fact that it was a decent brush, that's the winner. Thanks for being here, and I hope this comparison helped you feel more confident if you were looking for some budget-friendly watercolors. See you again soon.